this challenge comes from Stephen from the Data School, so thanks very much for submitting this challenge again, Stephen. It's a super cool challenge to work with. So we'll start down here with the Prime Ministers. So we take a look at these and we see that we have each Prime Minister name and we have their duration. So this is one field that has the start date and the end date. So we already know that we'll probably want to split those up. And then there's a little bit of extra cleaning we want to do because we can see Winston Churchill down here at the bottom. But we also see him here as Sir Winston Churchill because he had two separate terms as Prime Minister. So we want to group those together. So as I've got them highlighted right now, I can literally just hit on group values. And that's what I've done in this step. So we've grouped those together, so now we only have 17 Prime Ministers. So most Prime Ministers only serve one term or like one continuous period of time, but some have a break in the middle like Harold Wilson and Winston Churchill. Okay, so then we split up our duration, so just go to the three dots menu here, go to split values, and I did a custom split on the dash and split off all of those, and that creates us two fields for the start date and the end date. So let's just take a look here. So once we've done the split, then we get to this stage, and you can see that by just changing the data type here from string into date, then Tableau Prep's really good at picking that up and immediately changing those dates for those Prime Ministers. Okay, we just rename them to start date and end date PM. And for those null end dates, that's, for example, if I click on that, that is the current Prime Minister as I'm recording this. So we're just going to replace that with today's date. So we just do a little calculation where we say if it's null of the end date, then we replace it with the today. So, and else it's the end date. So if it's not null, then leave it alone basically. So now you can see that for Rishi Sunak that it is the 4th of 11th because that's the day that I'm recording this. Okay, and then we're going to scaffold this data set now. So we want a row for every day that they were the Prime Minister. So we use a new rows step and we use the values range from two fields, the start date and the end date. Name it PM days and we increment it by 1 day, so a row for every single day, and then we copy those values from the previous rows where we've generated those new rows. Okay, so the reason we do this is so that we can line up with the Chelsea managers. We want to catch everyone who was a manager on one of these days that they were in office. Okay, so let's take a look at the Chelsea managers now. So for this data set, I've removed a lot of the additional fields. I'm literally just keeping their name, their from date, and their to date. Okay, so the rest we're ignoring because these are all aggregated to the Chelsea manager level. So we're going to bring in information about the wins and the losses and all that sort of thing later on when we connect to the Chelsea matches data set. So we take a look at this data set, we've got the names and the from and the to. Okay, so we don't have to do that cleaning of the dates, which is great. We do need to clean up this null for the most recent Chelsea manager. And we do have a little bit of cleaning to do for the name because you see how certain managers seem to have been managers maybe more than once. Is that what the NBs are standing for? I'm not sure. But basically we want to get rid of that NB in square brackets after that. So I chose to do a split here, a custom split. I use the first square bracket and I split off the first, so anything that comes before a square bracket. So that'll just get rid of those, anything in square brackets after that. Okay, so that's what I do here. So I do that split on the name, and then that cleans it up nicely, and it helps to group together, as we can see sort of down here. Jose Mourinho, he was apparently Chelsea manager twice. There we go. So I just rename that field to be Chelsea managers. Then fix that end date, so replace that null with today's date, and similarly generate a row for every single day that they were the Chelsea manager. And exactly the same configuration as this new row step here. Okay, now let's think about the matches. So we've got a row for every single match that Chelsea have ever played. Whew, that's a lot of matches in their history. So we look at this data set. We want to clean up the date here. What else would we like to do? We want to filter the competitions to just those that are kind of considered as being proper. I mean, I'm not a football person, but this is what Stephen tells me. So we want to filter just the League Cup, Europe, which includes like the Champions League, and the FA Cup. So those are the 4 that we want to filter to. So we just filter to those, then we'll sort out the date. Okay, so we filter to those 4 competitions, literally just by clicking on them and saying keep only when there were more in the data set. Okay, and then for our date, I tried to just change it in my version of Tabular Prep to a date, and it didn't quite work. So I used a date pass formula instead. So it wasn't liking all of the like the THs and the uns, so like the second, the third, the first, the fourth. It wasn't liking those, so I did a replace of all those ones first of all, and then I used the date pass function to say that it is day, month, year, and turn that into a date. So that's how I did that, but I imagine there are different ways of doing that. It was just giving me some null values when I was directly translating it into a date for some reason. Okay, so I got rid of a lot of fields after that. I only kept my match date and the result. Okay, and then I created a calculated field called dummy with 1 values, because we're going to pivot this. We're going to create a column for how many matches have been drawn, lost, or won on each day. So I pivot this. It's just giving us something to count that dummy field. And then I want to just go ahead and replace all these nulls with zeros and then create a total matches played on that day. Okay, so I go ahead and do that, replace all these nulls with zeros, and just create a calculated field called matches, which is matches won plus matches lost plus matches drawn. Okay, so you can see that on certain days 2 matches have been played. I don't know why, but it was 1905. We're not going to worry too much about that. So then I need to join these up with my Chelsea managers. So do a join based on the match date and that generated field that we created for a row per day that they were the Chelsea manager, and we want to make sure that we're including all the days, not just the match days. So in my case I'm doing a right join here to include all those days that they were Chelsea manager but no matches were played. But you see that now we have some nulls coming back in, so we'll just have to again replace these with 0. So just doing some more grouping, just basically double clicking in the null and typing in a 0. Okay, brilliant. Now we're ready to join this Chelsea data together with the Prime Minister data. So we do a join here with the Chelsea manager days, all the days that the Chelsea manager was in their position, and join that to the Prime Minister days, all the days that the Prime Minister was in office. And if we just do a join there, then you can see that we lose some of our data. So we lose some of the Chelsea managers because we only have our Prime Minister data from 1940 or so, and then we lose some Prime Ministers because these are days sort of where maybe we haven't got all that information again before. So we're losing a bit of data where maybe there wasn't a Chelsea manager in between the Chelsea managers, whereas Prime Ministers, they have to come into office on the day that the other person leaves. Not so much so for the Chelsea managers, so that's why we're losing these rows. Okay, so now we can aggregate it. We don't need to have a row per day anymore. So we're grouping by our Prime Ministers, grouping by their start and end date, just so that we understand that level of detail again, counting the distinct number of Chelsea managers, and then summing up the matches won, the matches drawn, and the matches lost. Doing a little bit of renaming there, and finally just calculating our win percentage, which is the matches won over the number of matches, and rounding that to 2 decimal places. Okay, so now we can see that who has had the most Chelsea managers in their time in office. It was David Cameron. So there you go. That's an interesting data set to work with. I hope that you enjoyed the challenge of bringing lots of different things together, and thanks very much for watching.